A great pleasure of introducing Darren Godwell. Like all our speakers, he's got a very impressive CV, and I've just found out that he's a Maroons supporter. So all of a sudden, So he's going to get a varied reception, I think. Some yay and others nay. But anyway, Darren is the Chief Executive Officer for the Stronger Smarter Institute and has over 20 years executive leadership experience in indigenous affairs at both the community and public sector level. Darren has served for over 10 years as an advisor to strategy, business development and governance for indigenous organisations, including the Northern Land Council and Institute for Urban Indigenous Health. And as a director of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Legal Service, Queensland, and chair of its Finance and Risk Management Committee, he oversaw growth from 3 million to 20 million per annum with nearly 200 employees. For 4 years, Darren advised the World Bank on its Global Community Development Initiative, and he joined the global media conglomerate Bertelsmann AG in 2004, completing assignments in Shanghai, London, New York, Barcelona and Sydney on the matter of strategy. In 2012, here we go, the National Rugby League appointed him to its National Indigenous Council, and in 2014 he was elected Deputy Chair. Darren has a master's degree in sociology, completed his executive education with INSEAD Business School, France. Darren cites his professional highlights as working with Professor Mick Dodson to establish Australia's first national Indigenous controlled charitable foundation, the Lumber Indigenous Community Foundation, and service as Acting Chief of Staff for the Honourable John R. Kidd MP. Wow. Okay. Here's Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction as well. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're actually on Wiradjuri Nation land here, and they're a pretty deadly mob, pretty famous. They've got some very important members of their community and of their families that are having fantastic influence on Indigenous affairs nationally. So I just want to say I'm very happy to be here and to pay my respects to their elders, and both past and present, and to the ancestors of those people who walked this land and whose descendants live here today. I'm originally from Mount Isa. I don't know, has anyone been to Mount Isa or know Mount Isa? Okay. So Mount Isa and Parkes is, there's some similarities there. Obviously Parkes is a lot greener than Mount Isa, and Mount Isa has a much bigger mine than Parkes, but I grew up in regional Australia, so it's always great to get out of the cities and to come back to regional parts of this country, and I've been fortunate enough to do that over the years. Most recently with this role at the Stronger Smarter Institute. So I've got some slides up here, but I'll just indicate that the presentation's available. I don't read from the presentation, so if there's any more detail in there that you want, then please ask the organisers of the conference for the slides. They're freely available. So, and some slides I'll hop through pretty quickly, so I don't mean to in any way belittle the content of what we're talking about. It's just there's some things that probably I'm trying to make a point. So with that note, so last night I fulfilled a lifelong dream. I was actually called up for the State of Origin, and I was in Brisbane last night, so I was there on behalf of the NRL doing an acknowledgement to country before the game, because I'm a member of their Indigenous Advisory Council. So it was about 20 years later than I expected, but anyway, I'll take it. But I also had the great privilege, so my partner Selena and I took our 4-year-old son McKinley along to his first football game. So I'm very happy about that, and all through the evening he was saying, "This is not boring, this is not boring." So I guess my job's nearly done as a father. So if we jump into the first set of slides, I'll go through them individually. some people have heard about the Stronger Smarter Institute, had some idea we did something with schools, had some idea that maybe Chris Zara was involved, and over the last decade of the work of the Institute, it's been quite low-key but quite diligent in its efforts. So my responsibility is to share a little bit about what exactly the Institute has done and what are some of the impacts of our work. So in a very short way, succinct way, the Institute provides professional development for educators. We do that through a flagship program which is called the Stronger Smarter Leadership Program. And the values of the Institute are embodied in the delivery of that program, and the substance of that program, that training for educators, has been extended to community leaders as well, and is based primarily on the work of Professor Chris Zara. And so Chris was the first indigenous principal of an Aboriginal community in Queensland, a town called Cherbourg. And when Chris got there, he just said, why can't we do better? That was it. Why can't we do better? Why can't we do better for these kids? Why can't we do better with these teachers? Why can't we do better with this community? So that was his provocation to himself, and the challenge obviously he set for himself. And so over a number of years, Chris and those educators and those community leaders turned around the school and turned it into a lighthouse of fantastic outcomes for Indigenous students everywhere in Australia. It's been about 16 years since he started that journey. The Institute's been around for about 10 years. And so some of what I'm going to show you is more recent work that we've done. So people often ask, oh, well, how do you do this? What happens in this leadership program? What does this training actually involve? And for me, I've been the CEO now for 18 months. We're heading into 20 months. And the board engaged me to drive the growth of the organisation. And so we had to sort out some very basic elements about what we're communicating to people. And so the program itself is probably the most practical and pragmatic training that educators and community leaders are ever likely to do. So there's been lots of debate about what should be the priorities in education, curriculum, how to present it, pedagogy. There's been quite a bit of debate around why it's important to teach this. What there's been an absolute lack of is the how. How do you engage? How do you teach? How do you recognise differences in your classroom? How do you get out there and work with the parents to make them partners in the teaching of their children? The how part is the part that's often been the most needed, and even now, educators graduate from university and they don't know how. So for me, our work has been about, okay then, let's sort out some of our communication and let's document where we've got it, the how. And so these sets of slides are going to give you some sense about what happens out there when educators take the practices, the behaviours and the processes that we teach them, some of which you would have encountered anyway in other elements of your life or your profession or your career. And we put that in a way that enables the educator to take control, the professional to take control of what happens in their classrooms and in their communities for the school year. So we'll start here with Yarrabah. Yarrabah is a pretty deadly place, just south of Cairns, one of those Aboriginal missions that was created in Queensland and then renamed a community. Hey presto, it's now a community. So Yarrabah's up there. Yarrabah is a fantastic example about what happens when one person catches a fire and believes they can do something different. And that person is an indomitable force of nature, and his name is Spike Cotton, and Spike went in as the principal of the school. He didn't do this by himself. One of the things that Spike had learnt from doing the Stronger Smarter Leadership Program was how to engage with community leaders, because no change, no transformative change is ever just one person. It's always built on the bedrock of leaders and teams. And so Spike built a team. One of the things that happened when they started engaging with each other and they started looking at what they wanted to do, they reached a point where they said, listen, we've got a challenge here. We've got about 10% of the school population that's been disengaged. So about 10% of the children that should have been in classrooms were totally disengaged. So, you'll see this in suspensions, student disciplinary actions, expulsions, chronic absenteeism. These are signs that there's something wrong there. In the past, though, people would often conclude there's something wrong with the student. What's the matter with that person? What's the matter with this kid? Really, what's going on? We don't do that. One of our principals, and that's an ALS principal, is Spike, and he's in there, he's looking at this, and he's going, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And one of the principles he learned, the LES principles out of the program, was we are a strength-based approach. You've got to look at what you've got. In every place, in every community, there's ingredients, the raw ingredients for change. It's your job as the professional to find them. And so he did. And so they went door to door almost to find these children. And so through their efforts, 56 students who were not at school started to show up at school in regular attendance. They didn't show up 5 days a week. Some of them showed up at 2 days a week, and then they moved them up the chain. But there are 56 lives there that have been changed, because we all know what happens if you stay on the path and not being at school. All right? And so for Yarrabah, their success was what they could do as a community to support those 56 young people back into the confines of their school, and to say this is positive and there's an experience that we want to shape for you that works for you and your family. If we go to the next one, that's Yarrabah. Oh, by the way, with Yarrabah, don't go back to it. Yarrabah has got just over 500 students at one school, 98% is indigenous. So Glenroy at Orange, we've got some people from Orange here. Your town has a most incredible principal and school leader. Her name is Jane Cameron. And at Glenroy Heights, she has done incredible things through the last 8 or 9 years. Her staff are fabulous. They are dedicated and they are passionate. And the work that Jane has put in has turned up in some incredible ways. I mentioned before the idea about suspensions and expulsions. A lot of times people talk about data, and they want data to be everything. I'm a sociologist. I like data for the purposes of understanding what's going on. So for me, when I look at suspensions, and this is what's happened with the organisation, when we start looking at suspensions, suspensions are an indication for us of something else. They're a lag indicator. And the something else is a breakdown in relationship between the student and the educator. That's what suspensions are. For whatever reason, antisocial behaviour or inappropriate behaviour has been perceived as the student's fault, and the student's been held responsible, and that's why we suspend them. When in fact the educator should be challenged to understand what is going on in the life of that child, why is this behaviour manifesting itself, and what can we do to address it. If you don't address it, we know what's going to happen next. Oh, there's 3 strikes, you're suspended, you're out of here, you're expelled. So Jane Cameron, for example, started looking at their suspensions. 261 days. 261 days gained for teaching students. That's over 1.5 years of teaching. Now, the Department of Education already spent money on having the teachers and building the classrooms and putting the staff in there to maintain the school. And by focusing on those relationships, Jane and her staff have added 1.5 years of productivity to assets that already had an investment into them. People like numbers. I like numbers too, because they tell me some other story. We go to the next. The Kimberley. We hear lots of stories in the popular press about, education this, bad, it's bad, that, oh my God, we're never going to close the gap, all those type of things. And to some degree, I believe the Institute is responsible for not correcting the record. All right? We take some responsibility for not communicating what's actually happening out there on the ground. I was doing an interview just this morning on the drive-in, on the radio, on my phone, and I talked about this example. A So the Kimberleys, Western Australia, up there in the far northwest, it is another part of the continent, all right? It is different in every possible way. It's incredible. This region is the region we've spent the most amount of time in. It's happened for a number of reasons, but the Kimberley is a fantastic place for Stronger Smarter, not because of the weather, not because of the people, not because of the culture, but because of how great they are in their schools. And the one I'll point out here is in 2014, and it's on the far left over there, in 2014, for the first time in history, ever, for the first time in history, Broome Senior High School had 100% retention of every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student in every year. 8, 9, 10, 11 and senior. For the first time ever. And that happened because the parents of those children saw a value in education, because those children saw a value in being in the classroom, and because those educators took responsibility in engaging with the community. We'll go to the next one. Pomperao is another one of those Aboriginal communities that became, named by the Queensland government. Louise Jake, she's no longer the principal there, but Louise Jake is one of these incredibly diligent individuals, and she got, they say out in the centre you can get sung, and you get sung into culture, and they hook you in and you're stuck there for life. Louise got sung by Pomperao and the people of Pomperao. She went in as an early graduate teacher. She did a couple of years, she went away, she had to go back. She did a couple more years as a school leader, and then on her third stint she went back and she was the principal. Louise and the parents in Pomperao, and then the students, they wanted to focus on literacy. They said, let's just focus on literacy. That's a priority for us. Let's try and make sure we're all ready for these children when they leave this primary school environment onto high school. Back to Broome again. The number one talk about it once again is on stage right, on your left. Total enrolments. We've seen it published again on the weekend. There's a view, there's a select, it's a narrow, it's a limited view that if you want a good education, you can't stay in regional Australia. You have to move to the flash school or the big schools in the city. Well, I was educated in regional Australia, and for most of the people and the families that you work with, their children will be educated in regional Australia. And frankly, if we decide to forfeit the quality education for children in their own homes in regional Australia, we might as well all pack up and move to the coast. That's not a price we're willing to pay. And in fact, all the evidence we see suggests that you can get a great education with great teachers in a great small town, no matter where you are in this country. And so what we see here in Broome, and they did have a bit of a population bubble. People really did discover Broome and said, "Oh, we're moving to Broome," and lasted one wet season and then moved away. But what we had over there is we had a fundamental shift. So at the school, they said, we want to deliver the best education, secondary education that we can. Now, it didn't matter they were in Broome. We're going to try it. And so that they set their minds to. Enrolments, that's a good number. That's a good number. 900, ooh, that's a big number. It's jumped up. What's the story behind that? That's a lag indicator of confidence. The confidence of the parents that they didn't have to send their children south. They could get a good education at home. That's what it is. So enrolments is a lag indicator on confidence. If you're not confident that you're going to get a good education in that classroom, you're not sending your kids there. You're not even going there. And you're educated. So for us, enrolments are a good indication of the confidence of the parents and the community in their school. And once again, who's responsible for the quality of the education in that school? It's the educators. So we work with the educators to equip them as best we can, to support them and to show them very practical ways about how they can affect change in their schools and in their classrooms. And they do it. We'll go from Broome. What have we got? Ooh. Mildura, yeah? Is anybody from Mildura? Dennis Mitchell's been doing very well. He's done something quite significant. For us, Stronger, Smarter Institute. Well, the smarter part, everybody figures they can measure it, they can find a way to get a number on that. What about the stronger part? And what is the stronger part of the Stronger, Smarter? The stronger part is actually resilience, self-esteem, and identity. So Chris, being an Aboriginal principal in an Aboriginal town, decided if we're going to try and turn things around here, we've got to address the inherent racism that's in indigenous identities, and we've got to turn it on its head, and we've got to make being black about being proud and being resilient in yourself. What Chris didn't know at the time, but he since has, is when we start to affirm identities, we find all kinds of wonderful side effects that kick in. And I'll give you another example, and it's really important for me, and I believe for the sector. They really do. They need to work on it. By year 5, most girls understand that they're not going to be good at maths, science, and technology. There is an inherent bias that is in the way teachers teach and in the way they present information that sends a message to girls that they're not going to be good at subjects. And we know that's just not true. But unless we address that hidden bias, then we will not change systemically the outcomes that happen from school and from education. And you don't have to be a CSIRO scientist. You might just have a passion for science. You might just be particularly interested in what happens in your local environment. But if you've got to try and address this big block in your head that because you're a girl, you're not going to be any good at it, then we've got a whole different battle on our hands. Chris looked at it with Indigenous identity. We will continue to look at it when it comes to the hidden biases that are in there which affect girls as well for us. So, what did Dennis have a look at? He looked at the stronger part, and he did something quite radical. When he was trying to ascertain the resilience and the confidence of the students, he surveyed the students. How do you feel in this classroom? How do you feel in this school? Do you feel strong? Do you feel safe? His indexes are based on the results that come from asking the students. And so for us, it's a very exciting tool, and we're going to look to roll it out where other organisations and schools want to do it. But that's come out of regional Australia. Ooh, a big new idea, come from regional Australia. Click down. Aitken Vales and Townsville. It's a large regional centre. Capital of North Queensland, home of the Cowboys, current premiers. Judd had a challenge. He had a school he'd just been made principal of. 1/3 of the school population is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. And another third of the school are new Australians, migrants, newly arrived, refugees. And then he had probably another 10 or 15%, which were children of migrants, so not the newly arrived ones, but children second generation, first generation. So basically, over half of Judd's school was brown, and Judd's a white guy. And he was wondering, how am I going to relate to these kids, and how am I going to get my predominantly white staff to engage with these kids? In Townsville, they couldn't pack it up and move it somewhere else. This was a living, breathing challenge right there every day. So the first thing he started to look at is what are the interactions that we have between our staff and those kids that are of different cultural backgrounds. How are we addressing hidden bias? How are we raising to the level of awareness things that are deep-seated? And so through Stronger, Smarter training and through the program, they set about a whole number of processes which were about raising the level of awareness of their educators working in culturally diverse classrooms. I looked at some numbers when I was taken on this job. One of those numbers was I looked at the profile of the profession. It's pretty peculiar. It still remains predominantly, like plus 80% Anglo-Saxon. And this number is actually shifting, and it is plus 80% female. And then those graduates who are teachers are predominantly plus 80% from well-to-do backgrounds, so middle class to wealthy. It's still relatively homogeneous, which is kind of unusual. So we've got and now I've generalised, so we've got a group of mostly women, mostly white, mostly well-to-do, teaching student populations which are incredibly culturally diverse. And yet nobody's taught those teachers how to teach in that environment. So one of the things that we do with the leadership program is spend the first couple of days creating a safe environment and presenting information, and then through experience and practice demonstrating several dozen behaviours and processes which enable those educators to start to examine, how do I operate in a culturally diverse environment? And so when Judd did that with his staff, they realised they were kicking a whole heap of kids out the door for no good reason other than I had a misunderstanding about what you did. And really, that wasn't good enough for Judd. As the principal, it wasn't good enough. Those kids aren't someone else's problem that I suspend out of my school. Those kids are your students, and you're the educator who's paid to teach them. So let's find a way for that to happen. And once again, it showed up in the suspensions. The other thing that Judd managed to achieve is they identified 20 to 25 young boys, which were the problem kids. The problem kids. Within one term, and we have the data, within one term of intensive work with those boys, their reading levels had picked up. Within 2 terms, they'd gained almost 1 whole year of a reading level through engagement and through that intensive work. Judd didn't put any extra staff onto the task. Judd didn't have to create a special classroom for special needs. Judd worked with the staff that he had to make sure that they were professionally trained and capable to work with those boys. It works. It happens. And guess what? Most of those, mostly white, well-to-do women, are absolutely passionate about teaching. They get no bigger thrill than seeing a child go from here to here while they're in their classroom. This is the reason why teachers are teachers. This is why brilliant teachers are gold. We love them. We want more of them. One of the significant differences between what we do at the Institute and what other programs might do is that we start from a base where we like teachers. We do. It's true. I want to hang out with as many of them as I can. I get to as many programs as I can. We like what they do. We want them to do better. That strength-based approach starts with the educators. We like educators. We believe they can change children's lives. We believe there's enough evidence that says that they do that. Why wouldn't we support those educators? So we do. We must be close to the end of those data slides. Oh, my measles map. So unfortunately, people have thought, the Stronger Smarter Institute is only in Queensland. And no. So these are the locations where we've had educators come from over the first 10 years of our work. The larger the circle is the greater the density, so across the country. This is the both slide. It's more numbers. It shows the trajectory that we've been on in the last 2 years. So we're engaging with more schools than ever before. We've got more graduates than ever before. We'll double the numbers that we've had on the program in any one year this year. In the past, the most we've ever had is 15 programs in a year. This year we're on track for 32, and there's much more to come, and I'll get to why. Good. Aha! The exciting part. Sorry, I've only got 5 minutes to go.
No, you haven't.
If we go to the next slide. Okay, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. Right now, there is a black baby boom happening. It's happening across the country. It's of a size equal in significance to the post-war baby boom of the non-Indigenous population. It's of a magnitude of an extra 100 to 120,000 Jarjums. And for the first time in modern Australian history, we have a documented set of data which tells us what's coming. We don't have to wait 10 years from now and go, oh, who would have thought? Huh? These are not, the dotted line is the projection. The other numbers are real numbers. This is not based on some equation. This is based on birth certificates, right? This is based on birth certificates. Now, the chart that goes like this, if you look at their ages, it's the youngest on the left and then the oldest over here. So that's the black population. And of course, you know where the white population is. It's kind of the dotted line, it kind of goes like this, and then it fades away a little bit. That baby boom bubble's going through. Look at the size of what's coming. The reason I'm so passionate about this work and about applying everything that I've learned in the last 20 years as an executive is because we need to get ready. We know this is coming. We've not had this opportunity before in our lifetime. The leading edge of that bubble is 4. That's my son. He's 4. I go home every day and go, oh, taking another step to getting ready for you to go to school so you can get out of my house. It can be someone else's problem. Teacher, Miss whatever her name is. Oh, I love you, I love you. The leading edge of that bubble is 4. Behind them is 4 years of consecutive year-on-year growth. Consecutive year-on-year growth. If you thought you were doing great today, if you thought you were all on top of it today, let's see what happens next year when we add an extra 20,000 kids into the mix. Oh, no, you think you're still doing good? Let's add another 30,000 on top of the ones you already got. The magnitude of this challenge is almost unheralded before in the early childhood sector. We go, yeah. So this is where. The only thing you need to know is the blue is New South Wales. Yeah, and guess what? It's pretty high. It's pretty high. All right. I don't know what's happening in New South Wales. Black people are loving black people in New South Wales. It is cold, isn't it? It is cold. I can get that part. We used to have blackouts in Queensland. They sacked all the electricity workers and the power stations, and it's like baby boom. So. Okay, a little bit more data from the ABS. Where are the 3 fastest growing regions? And this is really important because we encounter this all the time. And if anybody wants to move to a growth area, the North Coast is calling out. So here they are. So Brisbane, it's about 30,000 actually. But it's not Brisbane, it's a corridor to the north and a corridor to the south of Brisbane. So that's the fastest growing region for this population. There are additional 30,000 kids. So you do the maths, you start working your way backwards. How many classrooms is that? How many staff is that? How much management is that? You get to a number. It's a lot. Western Sydney, and it's from Parramatta west to Penrith. So it's in that corridor there. And then the North Coast. And it's not just coughs. I don't want to misrepresent what's happening in coughs. It's actually the statistical region of the North Coast. Yeah? Bunjalong Knob. So, and so they're just the 3 fastest growing. The growth is pretty consistent across the country. Western New South Wales has got the similar profile, the growth profile, so it is large. Okay. So, what do we do about it? So for a decade we've been working with educators, nearly 2,200 by last count, just over 600 schools. On a school day today, they'll be standing in front of about 40,000 students. When it comes to Indigenous education initiatives, the Stronger Smarter Institute's work is the biggest in the country. We're the largest. My job is to drive the number of participants up to probably around 5,000. I've got to get Stronger Smarter educators in front of 100,000 kids. And so part of being diligent, a little bit savvier about our work, was to recognise that in the early childhood space, we've got all these jargons showing up. If we just let them come through the same system they've come through to date, we'll see the same inadequacies, deficiencies, challenges, and they're just going to lob on the shoulders of some poor, unsuspecting K-2 teacher who's just going to go, I've had enough, I'm out. You keep sending them, I've had enough, I'm done. So our wise investment is we need a response in the early childhood space. We need to offer the same level of support to early childhood carers and providers that we do with schools. And so we're pretty good at it. So we employed some specialist early childhood educators, respectively, one with 28 years in early childhood, one with 26 years. We started engaging with the sector, we started engaging with the departments. New South Wales is going to have the first pilot program in 3 weeks' time in Western Sydney. The first of 4 on the way to, fingers crossed, all 100 government-funded preschools in New South Wales. Queensland is behind. Yeah, take great pride in that. So Queensland's behind. They'll probably end up with 4 away this year, but we're waiting on a more systemic approach with Queensland. So once again, focusing on the how. You know? And when you start focusing on the how, you start to see incredible kind of outcomes. So yeah, everybody says, "Oh, you got to have indigenous knowledges. It's really important. You know, well, it helps kids." Nobody tells you how you're going to get some of that indigenous curriculum into what you're doing. We teach you the how. And we don't say, here's the one off-the-shelf product, go do it with everybody. We say, we'll teach you processes and practices to engage with local indigenous people, right? Engage with the local indigenous people, and the content will be co-created, and you will be the better for it, and the local community will feel empowered and more connected to you, which is kind of good, because we're dealing with their kids. So it's pretty important for us. Yep. So I'll go back to some of the fundamentals I want to leave you with. Why are we doing this and how are we doing this? Go to the next slide there. So these are the core values of the Stronger Smarter Institute. Now, you're going to hear other values from other people. Yeah, great. If you love them, they resonate more with you. Wonderful. I'm not asking you to take a bet and take the first and second or whatever. I'm just going to tell you what we're about. We have a belief in our own people, and that means Indigenous people. We actually believe everything that's needed for that transformative change in any community, in every community, already exists there. That's a bit radical, huh? That's a bit of a challenge. If you're in the business of deficit, if you're in the business of problems, then you're in the business of let me sell you. When in fact, everything we need for that effective change, that sustainable change, already exists in each and every one of you. A belief in the profession. I talked about how we like teachers, yeah. And for me, the early childhood and the caring space is in the exact same space for me. If we don't believe in you, Jesus, back it up. A strengths-based approach. How many times you're asked to focus on the problem? I went to business school, went to a couple of them, done plenty of courses, Ooh, what's the threat? Ooh, focusing on, oh, this is a problem, this would be a danger. How about we start with the strengths? It's challenging because we've got all kinds of messages coming at us to keep on focusing on the negative, keep on looking at what's sensationalist media, this is what happened, oh man, this is bad, this is not good. We're socialised into focusing on the what's not there. Oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, this is bad. It's a real difficult task to go back in yourself and to reprogram yourself to focus on the strengths. And you need some practice, yeah? I mean, you've had years of practice of being negative. You're going to take a little time to unwind that part and to reprogram yourself to be focused on the strengths. And we have a concept which we use called high expectations relationships. And the easiest way to me to communicate that is that it's actually two-way relationship. Right? The relationship can't be one way. It can't be, I'm the teacher, you do this, you're the student, go away. All right? I'm the teacher, or I'm the principal, your child's done wrong at this school, mum, now you need to fix it up. We actually believe and we train people in the high expectations relationship, and the relationship is the critical thing. No school is an island. Any principal that pretends that it is living in a dreamland. Yeah? Anybody that says, it's not my responsibility, I look after what's inside the school gate. Well, guess what? Those children bring what's outside the school gate with them inside the classroom that you're trying to teach. You can't stop that. Guess what? Those parents have perceptions of what's in your school gate based on their experiences. So, high expectations relationships, and it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, sometimes you don't want to do it. Most of the times you go, what the hell? It's frustrating. But there are moments of magic. There are moments when you and the parent actually see a child's life turn around. And it's those moments of magic that you can repeat by focusing on some really important principles. So, business head here. Does anybody do that kind of, what do they call it, bullshit bingo? Keywords on there, see how many times you, oh, he's talking about collaboration, tick, partnerships, tick. Yeah, all right, here's some. I'll give you a whole set. Somebody's going to get bingo. We're talking about kids at school. Not one kid, not one school. New South Wales has got 80,000 teachers. 80,000 teachers. This must be able to scale. It's got to be replicable. The days of boutique, kind of fringe, kind of, we have a remedial kind of, a pilot. There's one, pilots. There's a pilot program. We've got to get over that. We've got to start looking at scale. All right? And for those amongst us that are perfectionists, really, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. I can't do it until it's perfect. Don't let it go yet. It's not quite there yet. Another revision. You're going to have to live in a world of uncertainty. I'm sorry to tell you. Nothing is ever perfect. I'm not perfect. This is not perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. We have an action research-based approach because we want to learn. Guess what? I don't know everything. Until I sit down and ask some educators what's going on out there, I didn't know. So it has to be scale. It has to be viable. And it's a challenge for the early childhood sector at the moment. Yeah? Training, support for professional development and learning. It is a challenge, I recognise that. High growth and high demand. Well, I've told you about the black baby boom. That translates straight into demand. Those children, those children are going to have to go to some childcare somewhere. The question is, will it be yours? Will they be in your care? Will you make a difference in their life? Or will you forfeit that to someone else? Yeah? And this one here about supporting our own mob. That's kind of radical too, apparently. Supporting your own people. It's no different what happens in country towns across the country, everywhere. You look after your own. Because that's what it means to be human. And that's what it means to be fair income. You look after your own. And so we do the same. Woohoo! Evaluation, not going to run that one. We can go through the next one. Just this year, we've been to Monaro, Forbes, Curry and the Hunter, and Ballina. And here's Jane. And I mean, I have one of the most incredible opportunities and jobs in my life. I meet so many amazing people doing incredible things. And I mentioned Jane before. This is Jane, just giving a bit of a plug. But for Jane, as a school leader, she needed a platform upon which to affect the change. And until she had seen the how do you have these processes and behaviours, it was always a little bit beyond her reach. And so Jane is certainly a living, breathing example about what happens when you equip your people with the how. Because I think we're all agreed on the whats and the whens, Now, we need it now. you know, and what do we need? You know, we need more care. We need to support our students. We need to support our young people and our families. But how? Nobody's told you the how yet. You know, you get out there and go, oh, it's not working. So there is a way for it to work. And I think the last slide is just our details. So just our social media details. So to wrap up, and I'm pretty close, aren't I? Pretty close. So to wrap up, one of the things we've started talking about quite a lot now is that there are green shoots of hope and possibility. And one of the responsibilities I have is to communicate that to people. So I hope you've got some idea that that is actually happening. The other thing that it's really my responsibility is I can't go do this with all these kids. I can't do it. I mean, I love spending time with my 4-year-old as it is. I can't spend less time with him because I've got a whole heap of other kids. We, together, can. And that's what our sector is about. And we're all here because we want to do better with those kids. And there are ways that we can do it. And so my only suggestion is jump onto this stuff and see some of the other news and the other ways that it's happening. When you do hear about Stronger, Smarter Jarjums as an initiative, see if you can't be a part of it. If you can't be a part of it at that time, see if you can't find it and make it happen in your region. So thank you very much for your time. And we've got a couple of questions
I don't know about you, but I just found that hugely motivating and inspiring. So I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Questions for Darren?
My absolute favourite now is that, how's the black baby boom happening? It's like, okay, some of you might need to leave the room.
G'day, we're from SAC in Dubbo and Forbes. We're just wondering, is this leadership training available to us? We're not actually teachers, but we do engage the community to feed the preschool.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the kind of developments overall that's happened is we recognise now there are community leaders, and so the leadership is also it's a bit complicated. It's not leadership as in the principal or the deputy principal of the school or the CEO of the organisation. We believe that everybody has a role and they can lead. So yes, it is open, but for educators, we have the advantage. Schools are staffed by teachers. Teachers are required to do a minimum number of hours of professional development every year to stay registered. And the schools pay for that. But if they don't do that PD, they don't register as a teacher any longer. So yeah, that's where the money comes from. The money comes from participants and the schools that say, yes, this is valuable for us and we're going to send somebody along. So we have a national program which happens up in Cherbourg, and that's kind of special because that's where we started, and that's kind of expensive. And then the regional ones are a little bit cheaper than that, but they're still quite significant. It's $2,000 for 7 days of immediate residential contact with us in a phase 1, which is 5 days. Then we take a break of about 3 months, and individuals are actually asked to nominate a workplace challenge to apply what we teach them, and then they return about 3 months later for a 2-day follow-up with us, and the peer-to-peer support and review kicks in at that point as well. So it's probably a 4 or 5 month commitment, but it's very practical and very pragmatic. And what we find is that when teams come together from an organisation or from a school or from a community group, their workplace challenge they set for themselves is something that they've been wrestling with forever. And it's like, oh, we can never get our way. Well, this showed up again, it showed up again. And they get to work straight away. So the value for the organisation is immediate. It's not going to be like this where you take back the PowerPoint and say, hey, here's a PowerPoint, what I saw. It's very, very practical, very much results focused. It's not performance focused though. We're not into performance in this space. So it's about learning and deep learning. So, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Oh,
One down there.
down the front?
Here, look, take this one.
There.
talked about
Hold it close,
the like Baby Mountain.
Put it closer.
What about the rest of? Sorry. What about the rest of the population? Is that similar figures? No, it's going down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Must have missed that. I was thinking about that.
No, the non-Indigenous population is actually kind of contracting. That's why he had this bloke. He used to be the treasurer. He said this idea about, yeah, have one for mum, one for dad, and one for the country, and I'll throw in a baby bonus and everything else like that. Yeah, it's one of those intergenerational issues. So no, the non-Indigenous population, by comparison, is kind of contracting, lucky to keep up with replacement. So yeah, so growth potential for the business of childcare, it's black.
Indigenous families, maybe increased identification.
It's true. That is true. That's true. Ooh, talking to a sociologist though.
Yeah.
True. So there are a couple of factors in there. So yes, increased identification is a small component. But in the main, people don't have children just to have children. You know? They need other things to be happening in their life. And a couple of things are, they need to feel a little more safe in their environment. Okay, then, you know, and I'm not a woman. I'm not going to mansplain, but women take choices about when they have children. And so really, what's happening is Aboriginal women are going, now I feel pretty safe where I am. And if you don't have straight out institutionalised oppression and racism happening, like it happened for my mum and the Aboriginal women before them, if you don't have that straight out institutionalised racism going on, then you might feel a little bit better about your prospects. So there's a little bit of that. There's also, not only do you feel a little bit safer, but you feel a little bit more confident about your future. Okay then, if we have a baby now, you know, it's the right time for us, or you know, someone's got a job, my partner, she's doing this, so it's okay, you know. So these are the kind of considerations. So that safety and that confidence about the future, they're the bigger factors. So for Black Australia, it's been a case of, and when you think about it, it's recent history whereby that racism has been confronted and in some ways challenged and put to the side. And then the other thing that's happened is really, and you know, truth be told, when I was on the board of the Aboriginal Legal Service, most black organisations were created because their clients were denied access to those very services in the mainstream. The reason why there's an Aboriginal Legal Service is because black men and women couldn't get legal representation. The reason why there were black childcare agencies is because black families didn't feel like they're being treated with respect in mainstream services. And so as that's changed, those things have come together. So they're the big things. The self-identification is a factor, not a big factor at all. Don't worry about that one. That's just like a list of possible things. Yeah, probably things happen. There was a great weather that year and that had a bigger impact, you know, quite extraneous factors. So, but.
Just with your numbers with the baby boom, would you say that could possibly be even more with the amount of I know my clients that have no birth certificates or registrations?
Yeah, the ABS acknowledges that there is a degree of undercount. And they sometimes, it's speculation, there's sometimes between 5 and 15% as an undercount. So, people weren't in the same place or they didn't have a birth certificate. So there is a degree of undercount there. What I'm absolutely confident of is that those numbers aren't ambitious. All right? So they're baseline data. It's not extrapolated where there's a degree of speculation in there. That's baseline data. If there's going to be a variation, it will be upwards. So, yeah.
I'm not a teacher, I've not been to university, but could you tell me if you know that with uni students going to university to become teachers, is this not learnt as part of their, a compulsory component of their 4 years at uni to be prepared when they go into a school? This is a plan that they can have, or foresight it's going to happen, and how to handle it?
There is a big disconnect between what faculties of education teach and what's required in the classroom. So there's a big disconnect there. A couple of great numbers, some data. 1/3 of the students that are enrolled in a university teaching degree, so 1/3, graduate, never go into teaching. They do the prac teaching and go, oh, no way in the world, I'm not doing that job. But my HECS debt is so much, I've got to finish this one. So a third right there. Within 3 to 5 years of graduating and moving into a classroom, right, within 3 to 5 years, a third of those that went in there have got out. And they get out because they feel underprepared for the job at hand. Now, I'm in business and I'm going, well, a third of my customers are actually saying this doesn't work for them. What do you do about it? At the moment, universities aren't doing a whole lot. So, and then New South Wales is great, really great. You know, we've got the black baby boom at this end. Right, at the other end, you've got the white baby boom, and 4 years ago, they started retiring. All right? 4 years ago, baby boomers started retiring. In New South Wales, in the next 3 to 5 years, 30% of every principal has indicated they will retire. And 25% of the profession, when you put the principals in there, 25% of the profession said they are eligible for retirement and they expect to take it. So if you ever thought about getting into teaching, now's the time. You've got a couple of years, you're going to fill in. So in the most incredible confluence of circumstances, we're going to see a wholesale change in the leadership of schools at every level and the profession. We've never seen that type of generational change before. And so that's coming as well. So at the time we're going to need more educators, better trained, more appropriately trained. Universities aren't doing it. So it's kind of, I think there's a very colourful phrase to describe that, but for us, our job is to get as many teachers and as many schools and community leaders stronger, smarter as we can. Our job is to get stronger, smarter jargons available to as many of you as we can, those that have an interest in trying to work with the Koori families and the kids that you have in your communities, because it's a growth opportunity. If your management doesn't know this yet, then instead of coming in saying, oh my God, they cut our budget, it's like, oh my God, look at the size of this population bubble in our neighbourhood. What are we doing? So it's all bright.
Thank you. Thank you.